Dynasty rebuilds don't take too long because people commit too hard. They take a really long time because people don't commit cleanly. And today I want to show you how to rebuild with intention so you're not stuck in the middle and you can start competing for championships for years to come. My name is Caleb and welcome to the Dynasty Edge HQ, where we help you think like a GM and get your dynasty teams from rebuilding to contending and winning championships for many, many years to come. And today we're going to be talking about why most dynasty rebuilds take way too long and don't get their team back on track. And then the first point that I want to make is that rebuilding without direction is still being in the middle. If you are trying to rebuild and you don't have a clear direction for your team, if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a plan for what you're going to be doing for your team is just as good as being in the middle. It's just as good as being stagnant. And so you really want to get your team in the position to go forward, and you really want to commit cleanly to that rebuild. You don't want to get stuck back in the middle of being, not making any moves, not positioning yourself so that you can start winning in the future, not taking advantage of value spikes and value dips. You want to be intentional with your team and make the right moves so that you can get your rebuild going, so you're not stuck in a perpetual rebuild every year. You know that team that just has picks every single year. They're not making moves forward. They're not really doing anything besides trading and just getting more, picks and picks and picks. They're not actually doing things with those picks. And so you wanted to get your team in a position to start rebuilding and getting back to competing as soon as possible instead of being stuck in a rebuild forever. So a couple things you want to do is you want to pick a target year. What's the year you want to rebuild for? If you're coming off the 2025 season, we have the 2026 draft right now. The 2027 draft is going to be one of the best or biggest hyped drafts in the history of dynasty football. And so if you're looking to rebuild, if you're possibly looking into doing that, a great time to do that is right now and get your team ready for after 2027, because that draft is going to be amazing. It's filled with so many players and so many positions. And so setting yourself up now with a timeline is a great time to do that. Or, you could be, hey, I want to rebuild it or retool it this offseason to be ready for 2026 season. That's fine too. But having a set time and a set strategy for your team is going to set yourself up the best. And every move that you make should set yourself up for that timeline. Don't get too impatient in making moves to getting into contending before you're ready. Don't be so inactive that you're not getting your team in the best position to start winning. You want to get yourself in a position to set yourself up the best you can for the future and make moves to do that. You want to increase your core value. You want to improve liquidity on your team. You want to get assets that are liquid. What that basically means is that it's an asset that you can just move anytime that you want. Picks are great. People are always wanting picks. That's a great opportunity to make a move so that you can improve your team at any point. So get assets that are high in value, have a lot of future value promise, or can be traded at any point, are great assets to have on your team in a rebuild so that you can set yourself up for years to come. Now, one of the principles I talked about in my Dynasty Rebuild and Roster Construction series was having depth principles and building your team out for depth. And I wanted to say that doesn't just apply for contending teams, it also applies for rebuilding teams. Having depth on your team, grabbing a bunch of quarterbacks, grabbing a bunch of running backs that are not starters is a great strategy to have so that you can trade those players at opportune times. Depth is trade leverage in your team. So having depth, having players that have value or have opportunity to go and score points during the season is the greatest time to be able to benefit your team and trade those assets. You find a player that's popping up in free agency news or popping up in trade reports, grabbing that player and then trying to send out offers for them. People are always looking into different stories in the NFL. And so they are going to want those players in the news because people are talking about them. They're a hot commodity. A great way to look at it is if you're on Sleeper, looking at the trending players. And if you see one of the trending players is not on anybody's roster, grab that player and then go offer it to a few different teams. The more active you are, the more intentional you are to get your team in the better position, is a great way to set your team up for success. Every third, every fourth round pick is a great opportunity to better your team. You don't just need first, you don't just need seconds. I could think of so many times where I traded players for fourth round picks that then brought my team success down the road, or traded away players for those things so that I could get a different player down the road. So always look for ways to benefit your team, to get your team in the right position so that you can win, and take advantage of these different spikes, whether spike up or a dip down. Depth matters even on a rebuilding team, because depth can give you the ability to have trade leverage on your team. The next thing is holding players too long is a rebuild killer. If you have players on your team too long, whether that's because you're really attached to that player, that's a player that you have really liked, or they're one of your favorite players, so you hold on to them for a really long time. Now, I get the player attachment if that's like your favorite player, and maybe that should be a side issue, but you might have a player that has a lot of potential, but just isn't reaching that potential every single year. Holding on to that player too long while they have value is a mistake that you can make. So look at the players, look at your team, look at your timeline. Hey, I'm going to try and compete in 2026. What players on your team are going to be good for that, going into that, and what players are not making the cut? And if any player is not going to get you towards your rebuild in that time and has a ton of value, it's a great time to move them, and move them for another asset that has promise, but also get some picks back in return. I think that's a great way to do that. And then also, just having players on your roster that are old aging vets, get those players off your team, trade them for seconds, trade them for thirds, consolidate them and go get a first or get multiple firsts if they're a really good player that's a vet. Just finding ways to help your team not get stuck in the middle is the best way to do it. And so holding players too long, you don't get paid for being right eventually, right? You want to get your team in the place to win so that you can be right now. And so I think that setting your team up for the best success, not just waiting on that potential year, find players that are producing, but also have, a little bit of breakout ability down the road. A big trade asset that I'm looking at is players like Drake London. They kind of broke out, but they haven't really broke out all the way. Or a player like Garrett Wilson that's just one quarterback away from being elite. Those are great players to have on a rebuild. Go after those players. But any player that, has a ton of value but isn't producing all the way, that might be a time to get rid of that player so that you can get some value back. And that's a great thing to do. So don't lose value overnight. You don't want to lose players slowly over time without making a move to capitalize on their value on your team. The next point I want to make is that draft picks only work if you know how they'll be used. So if you have that rebuild timeline, you want to be ready for 2026 or 2027 or 2028 if you want to be a slow burn in this process. I think that you could do it faster than that, but to each their own in their own timing. Draft picks only work if you know what you're going to do with them. If you went out and you got the 101, maybe your plan is to draft the 101. Typically, that's going to be a running back. Sometimes it's a quarterback, but if you're a rebuilder, the running back is probably not the position you want to get. So maybe you have a plan to trade that 101 on draft night for a load of picks. Okay, great. What if you also have the 1.06? Are you planning on drafting a player, or are you planning on trading that for a veteran like Jonathan Taylor, so that will better your team? Maybe you're trading for a wide receiver. Maybe you can get a Drake London. Maybe you can get a Garrett Wilson for that 106 and something. Finding ways to trade those picks for players, but having a plan for your picks is really smart. Think like a GM. When GMs go into their drafts, they have a plan for how it's going to go. They know all their options. Hey, we could probably get a pick for this. We could probably, have a way of benefiting our team, or have this player that we can get at this value. So think like a GM. Have a plan for your draft. Have a plan for your rebuild so that you can get your team in the best position to win. If you're in the 2026 draft this year, a great strategy I have is that, let's say I have a pick in the second round and there's just no one in my tier that's available at that pick. Maybe there's just no one around that I'm really interested in. Maybe I offer that second round pick to somebody else for a second and a third next year. And oftentimes you'll find that people will take those deals because they want to draft the player now. So be patient, have a plan, think of options, think of what the best move is for every other team in your league, and try to meet that move with the different things that you offer to other people. If you think like a GM, it's going to set you up for success down the road. Look for draft picks. Draft picks are the most liquid thing that you can have on your team. You can trade them, you can move them, you can, multiply them in so many different ways. And so having a lot of pick, ability is great as long as you have a plan. So go after picks. Don't hoard picks without having a plan. Don't let picks die on the clock. So don't just pick random players. Have a plan for that. I'm going to have some draft videos that are going to be really helpful for you in drafting the right players at the right value. So be on the lookout for that. I'm really excited to share that video down the road. And then the last reason that people can get stuck in a rebuild for way too long is that they go into the trap of being an accidental contender. And what happens is the rebuild starts working, the team sneaks into 6th place, and then they start to trade their assets to push all in to go win a championship. And that's okay if you actually go win the championship, but oftentimes what happens is people do that. They get barely into the playoffs, they start trading assets away to try to win. There's variance. What if players get hurt? What if those players don't perform after you've bought them? What I do, if I get into 6th place, I am still looking for value. What ways can I trade away players, even to the team that I'm playing, so that I can get value back and continue building up my team? You don't want to go all in unless you're a top 3 team in your dynasty league. You want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for win. If your team starts to win, look at your max points for, look at your points for, look at your points against in your league. Figure out, are you truly a contender, or are you just kind of a I snuck in kind of a thing? Don't break your rebuild just because you think you're a contender and you get overly excited. You don't want to set yourself up to lose for more years because you just got overly excited. A lot of people call this a house money year, where you go into the playoffs, you didn't expect to make it, you made it. Just continue to go forward with that team. Maybe you do trade away an asset to get some more value back. Maybe you just keep that team and just see what happens. That's okay. My advice would be, a way you can get stuck in rebuilding is to go all in, lose your assets, and then have to rebuild again and start from zero. So don't get stuck in that trap. Don't feel like you have to jump into contending before you're ready. Set your team up for success. Always look for value. Always look for ways. When I go in, even as the number 1 team, I am always looking for value. Always looking for play. This past season, I traded away Jacoby Myers to the team I was playing against because I saw that they had a receiver that they needed, and I had an extra one, and I was able to get more picks for my team. Always look for value. I didn't care that it was the team I was playing. Could I have lost because of that? I could have. Fortunately, that game, I still won. But you could still make value picks. It's always important to set your team up for success and think of it like a GM. What does a fast rebuild actually look like? It's figuring out what year you're going to get to compete. It's following your timeline. It's having a liquid roster very early on in the rebuild process, getting a lot of picks, getting a lot of value, going down from elite players to insulated assets that are just going to continue to grow over time for more picks and more players. Using your depth on your roster as leverage for trades is a great way. And then being aggressive in selling windows. I can't tell you enough how important it is for your rebuild to be aggressive. Don't just throw people up on the trade block and hope that somebody's going to make a trade. Go to every single owner, offer them a trade. Offer them a trade if they need a position that you have a player that can fill that position. Think of it as, what does everybody else want and how can I meet that need? And then do that and constantly be aggressive. And then make that clean pivot from rebuilding to contending. As soon as you know you're a top team, that's the point you could start going all in. But don't break your rebuild before it's ready. If this video was helpful for you, I would appreciate if you would subscribe, comment down below the word rebuild if you're rebuilding. Maybe you're in the middle if you're in the middle of those things, or contender if you're a contending team. Let me know what thing helped you today, and I want to know how it has helped you to be able to take your team from rebuilding, contending, and I just want to be along for the process. We're going to have more videos about the 2026 draft and also more ways that you can really fast forward your rebuild so that you can build strong contending teams. This is Caleb with the Dynasty Edge, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.